The Tibet Plateau is the third largest, home to the third largest concentration of glaciers. There are 46,000 glaciers scattered along the 14 great mountain ranges that are present on the Tibet Plateau. If something happens on the Tibet Plateau, it will affect billions of people across Asia.
Namaste and welcome to our third episode of our podcast series, Understanding Asian Hydropolitics Through 5 Questions, brought to you by Asian Confluence, and I'm your host, Neeraj. And I'm excited to dive into another vital topic shaping the future of Asia's resources and geopolitics. So today, we are exploring a topic of a very immense ecological and strategic importance, Tibet's melting crown, environmental fragility, and Asian water futures. As always, we will unpack this through 5 thought provoking questions designed to spark clarity and inspire meaningful dialogue. And I'm honored to join today by Mr. Tempa, who is currently a Deputy Director of Tibet Policy Institute. He is also a leading expert on environmental issues in Tibet with extensive research on impacts of climate change and infrastructure development on Tibetan Plateau. His work bridges environmental science, policy, advocacy, and offers a very critical insights into the region's role of Asia's water tower. Mr. Tempa, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Neeraj, for having me on your podcast.
Okay, thank you, Tempa ji. So let us begin our this podcast with a very big picture. So we often hear that Tibet is often referred to as a very third pole due to its vast ice reserve and critical role in Asia's water system. So can you please elaborate on Tibet's environmental significance for Asia, particularly as a water tower for the continent? Over to you.
That's right, Neeraj. Tibet Plateau is called the third pole, rightly called the third pole in recent years by many scientists. Now, in the schools and in the colleges, we have been taught that there are only 2 poles, North Pole and South Pole, and that the 2 poles are very important in regulating global climatic system. But fortunately, we have a third pole, that is the Tibet Plateau. Now, many people who might not have heard about Tibet Plateau as the third pole must be wondering how Tibet Plateau can be the third pole. Now, look at it this way. The 2 poles are important because of the massive presence of glaciers there. Similarly, the Tibet Plateau is the third largest, home to the third largest concentration of glaciers. There are 46,000 glaciers scattered along the 14 great mountain ranges that are present on the Tibet Plateau, which is why it is called the third pole. Now, because there's a large concentration of glaciers on the Tibet Plateau, when the 46,000 glaciers, when they melt to become the head source of Asia's greatest rivers. Niraj, you may, if you have traveled to any part of Asia, you are never far from Tibetan rivers. You go to Pakistan, the 2 most important rivers there, Satluj and Indus, which basically sustain the country itself, coming from Tibetan plateau. And then the most of North Indian rivers, Indus, Kanali, Satluj, Brahmaputra, all of these rivers are coming from the Tibet Plateau. And then you go to Southeast Asian countries, Burma, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, 2 most important rivers in those countries, Selvin and Mekong, 2 rivers that have sustained civilizations and that continue to sustain those countries, are coming from the Tibet Plateau. And then go to China, 2 most important rivers there, the Yangtze River in the south and the Yalu River in north, running parallel to each other, basically crisscrossing almost whole of China, is coming from the Tibet Plateau, which is why Tibet Plateau is called the water tower of Asia as well. Now, there are scientific papers which has clearly stated that 1.8 billion people are directly dependent on the Tibetan rivers, and that 1/3 of global community, some way or other, is benefited by the rivers coming from the Tibet Plateau. That's how the Tibet Plateau plays its role in sustaining life and contributing to the global economic progress and a stable climatic system.
Tempaji, that's a very powerful way to frame Tibet's role here, and it's truly a lifeline for the millions across Asia. With that in mind, let's zoom into the challenges this region faces. So climate change is, reshaping landscape worldwide, and Tibet is no exception here. So what are the most visible and alarming environmental changes occur in the Tibetan plateau due to this climate change? What is your take on it?
Neeraj, I have been working on Tibet's environment since 2011, specifically focusing on the impact of climate change, social, environment, economic, and cultural impact on to the Tibetan community in Tibet. And I have noticed that since 2015, the impact of climate change has been much more visible across the Tibet Plateau. Now, the primary factor for the increasing number of natural disasters in Tibet is due to rising temperature, which has led to increased uh, melting of glaciers and melting of frozen grounds, and also increasing precipitation, increasing rainfall. Now, what has that has now that the increased precipitation and also increased temperature has led to more floods, forest fires, glacier slide, mudslide across Tibet Plateau. Now, what we need to understand is that Tibet Plateau being the roof of the world, the third pole of the earth, and the water top of Asia, anything that happens over there naturally has impacts across the region that are located adjacent to the Great Plateau. So I'll give you one very recent example. There was a flood in Nepal, and many people wondered what really caused that flood because there was no rainfall, there was no cloud burst, so nothing that actually caused a flood in proper Nepal. And now scientists have found that the flood so actually happened in Tibet, and that flood naturally has to flow to our lower region, so it rushed into Nepal and caused a lot of destruction. So similarly, anything that happens on the Tibet Plateau will have natural impact to Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and other regions. Now, I'll give you one example. The first ever weather forecast here in India was issued in, if I'm not wrong, was in 1892 or 1882, based on the amount of snowfall received on the Tibet Plateau the previous month. So they thought the scientists thought that greater the snowfall or snow cover on the Tibet Plateau, weaker the monsoon here in India. Similarly, there are other scientific papers which has linked that the recent increasing heat waves across Europe that we have seen last few years is also linked to receding glaciers or receding snow cover on the Tibet Plateau. Furthermore, they have also linked that greater the snow cover on the Tibet Plateau, warmer it is in Canada or North America. So basically, the climatic system across the globe is influenced by what is happening on the Tibet Plateau.
Okay, so that's a very stark reminder how rapidly things are changing due to climate change. And the scale of these impacts is also very sobering, especially for a region which is so critical of Asia's water system. So now let us explore how human activity is adding to these challenges. Tibet has often seen as a very infrastructure, seen as a very significant infrastructure development, including the large scale hydropower projects also, and the dam construction also, which is also in the news recently. So how do you see these projects impact downstream countries, specifically if we talk about South Asia or the Southeast Asia? What is your take on it?
Niraj, unfortunately, the Tibet Plateau, the roof of the world, the third pole, the water tower of Asia, a plateau that is not only the largest and the highest on Earth, but it's one of the most beautiful plateau, is facing unprecedented destruction from excessive construction of dams, resource extractions since 1950s after the Chinese occupation of the Tibet Plateau. Now, it is not that we Tibetans didn't know how to build dams or how to utilize the natural resources that were present. But we have a cultural way of life that has great reverence to mountains and rivers. So we basically have lived on the plateau sustainably, successfully, because look at this. In 7th, 8th, and 9th century, we were one of the most powerful empires in Asia. We basically influenced political systems across Asia. So we were that powerful. But we have always respected the natural system, the natural balance on the Tibet plateau because if something happens on the Tibet Plateau, it will affect billions of people across Asia. But ever since Chinese occupation, Chinese are known for building dams. We all know China has the largest number of dams in the world, and after occupation of Tibet, they have accelerated building dams in Tibet. One of the most stark example is the super dam that China has started to build in the last few days on Brahmaputra. Now this is a serious issue, and right there are why it is serious issue is that this is much bigger than the Three Gorge Dam that we all know of, and it is located only 30 kilometers away from Indian border, and it is located on world's highest river Brahmaputra, and it is located on the Tibet Plateau in the southern edge of Tibet Plateau, a region that has witnessed many earthquakes, a region that has witnessed many landslides, a region that is highly unstable. So even though the Chinese scientists have improved their skill in building dams, climatic system has have been unpredictable in recent years. Global ecological stability is disturbed. So if something happens there, I'll give you one example. There are 13 dams being planned on the same river. If one dam collapses due to an earthquake, due to a landslide, or in recent years we have seen cloudbursts, something happens, that that collapse of dam would cause collapse of other dams, and 30 kilometers from Indian border is not very far, and that too from higher elevation to lower elevation. The flood would surge into the plains of India and Bangladesh and will affect millions of people in those regions. So this is a serious issue, and not only on Brahmaputra, they have built dams on other Tibetan rivers that flow into other Asian countries. So this is a serious issue, and governments and scientists and the people in India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia regions should come together in collaboration to raise these issues with China. Because, like the Tibetans, we have respected the rivers. The Chinese government should respect the free flow of the rivers so that everyone can flourish along these great rivers that are coming from the Tibet Plateau.
So, Tempaji, that's really highlights the ripple effects of the decisions which are made in Tibet far beyond its border. So, it's a very complex interplay of development and the consequences. So, now let us look at the governance side of it. The China's approach to managing Tibet's environment is offer under scrutiny. So, how does that the Chinese government's approach to environmental governance in Tibet, which is differ from the other regions. So, what are the long-term implications of it? How do you see it?
Uh, Niraj, it's what is it's the Chinese government has there are a lot of contradictions when it comes to environmental policies in China. China has signed the Paris Agreement, and during which they have said they will peak carbon emission by 2035, and then also gradually decline in production of carbon emission. And for that, and also because China is rapidly developing, and as a developing fast developing nation, they also require public the people in the region require a better environment. For that, they are reducing coal produced energy. But how they are reducing that is by building more dams in Tibet. So the Chinese government is benefiting from destroying Tibetan environment. They have built many more dams on the Tibet Plateau in recent years than before to bring in more so-called green energy. For China, green energy is building more dams, but other scientists across the globe are reducing building of dams because they no longer see dams as green energy. The cost to the displacement of millions of people, the cost to the environment itself, the cost of submerging large portion of forest land, cultural heritage. So the Chinese policy now on the global stage, I have participated at many of UN climate summits, and at those summits, Chinese delegates they always boast about how China is building more green energy, say being the leader in solar panels, lithium batteries, electric vehicles. Now, China has some of the largest mining resources in Tibet when it comes to lithium. They are mining lithium in Tibet, and now they are building dams in Tibet. Why? Because they want to achieve green energy ambition. And so China's green policy is destroying Tibet's rivers, Tibet's mountains for the benefit of the Chinese population and to achieve Chinese government's green policy. So it's not a holistic approach. It's not a equal approach. So it is not being implemented equally across the region that China occupies. So this is a strange. It's something that we all must notice and must understand.
So that's a very eye-opening perspective on a very unique challenges of governance which is currently happening in Tibet. And it raises a very critical questions about the sustainability and accountability. So now let's explore to the potential solutions. So what are the solutions to it? So given Tibet's ecological fragility and its importance to Asia's water future, so what role can the international organizations, the civil society, or the neighboring countries, or even the Tibetans can play in safeguarding this critical region? How do you see this for a long term?
Niraj, this is very important. This is a very important question that you put forth, and this is an area that we Tibetans have been pushing since for many years. Particularly myself, someone who have represented Tibetans at UN Climate Summit since 2011, have been asking the international community to recognize the global ecological importance of the Tibet Plateau. As I said, it's the third pole, it's the roof of the world, it's the water tower of Asia. It basically influences global climatic system and feeds billions of people. So this has to be recognized. This has to be recognized, and scientific community should come together to explore more scientific research on the role of Tibet Plateau in regulating global climate system. And for the Chinese government, a stable, beautiful Tibetan plateau is good for them because most of Chinese rivers are coming from Tibet. And also, there are millions of Chinese population travel to Tibet as a tourism because China is basically polluted soil, land, air, and the water. So they want to have some refreshment, something to refresh themselves. So they travel to Tibet. If Tibet is polluted, if Tibet is destroyed through mining, damming, then where do this all the Chinese will go? Because China is there's already a economic slowdown, which means the luxury of traveling to Europe and other countries is limited in recent years. So Tibet is the best option for them to travel. So this is one thing for China, and also building many dams in Tibet on the Yalu River and Yangtze River will also have ripple effect in China. Because I'll give you one example. There was a massive landslide that blocked Yangtze River for 11 days. Fortunately, it happened in the winter. If that it has happened in the summer, the landlocked river has to burst out someday, and that bursting would cause death of millions of people in China. Fortunately, this did not happen. So something could similar to that could happen in the future. Now, then to Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, these are three countries that are immediately could have a replication from damming of Tibetan rivers, say Indus River or Brahmaputra River. So they have to come together to raise these issues. And then Southeast Asian countries, Mekong and Salween, two most important rivers in those regions. Mekong is already facing a lot of issues there. So all the riparian countries must come together. We have been trying to organize conferences of riparian countries to come together and speak to each other and understand it. We are not against China as say per se, but we are against building of unnecessary, excessive number of dams, mega dams that could have serious implication to the community. So riparian countries should must come together. And the UN Climate Summit, the UNFCCC organizes COP conference every year. UNFCCC can no longer kind of mm, go on with the so-called trying to contain carbon emission without including Tibet on the discussion table. It is a half-boiled egg in any ways. So this has to be discussed.
Yeah, so Tempaji, that's really an inspiring call to action. Collaboration and advocacy is very clearly, have a vital role to play, and it's a reminder that Tibet's future is tied to the future to the entire region. Thank you so much, Mr. Tempa, for sharing your expertise and making these complex issues to very easy to understand. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us for this third episode of Understanding Asian Hydropolitics. If today's discussion resonated with you, so stay tuned for our more upcoming discussion. Till then, thank you so much. Good day.